Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start here in a couple of minutes. Going to let everybody get logged in, and then we'll kick off. Deb, welcome back. Good to see. Hope things are good in Ohio. I think you guys are getting some pretty bad weather up there. Hello, Jordan. Welcome, Bill. Give a couple more minutes here. We got about 20 people in. Ethan, if you can bring up the PowerPoint, that'd be great.
Yep, there you go. Can you see that?
Yep, thank you. For those just joining us, we're going to kick off here in a couple of minutes. Just want to give enough time for everybody to get in. And as always, if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to go ahead and post them in chat or in the questions section, and we'll get those addressed as soon as possible. Okay, looks like we got a quorum of about 22 of you in. So we'll go ahead and kick off at this point. I want to thank everybody for being here. Welcome again to another Webinar Wednesday presented by XenTegra. Today we're going to be speaking with PrinterLogic, but before we get kicked off and hand everything over to Ethan, I'm going to go ahead and go through my intro. So if we can go to the next slide, please. As always, we have the Bronco giveaway. If you go to the URL here presented, and once we get done, I'll go ahead and post it in the chat as well, a link to it. But feel free to go ahead and enter in for a brand new Bronco that we're giving away. If you go to that splash page, you'll be able to see what you need to do, details to register for the giveaway itself, to be hopefully a lucky winner of the Bronco. The next slide. XenTegra. So if you're not aware who we are, or if you are, here's a refresher for you. But to give you some background, we are a reseller in services and solutions, doing everything as far as it relates within the digital workspace arena. So that would be everything that you're providing to your users, such as EUC or SaaS-based applications, security within that, zero tolerance as far as making sure all those devices and peripherals are all squared away. So we handle that wide spectrum within the digital workspace to make sure that you're giving the best solution you can to your end users. You go to the next slide. A little about myself. I live in Baltimore. I'm sitting here in my office. Hi, everybody. Presenting to you today. I've been basically an evangelist within the cloud as it's concerned within that virtual workspace environment. I've got about 25 plus years within EUC published applications and bringing those solutions, remote solutions to users. Recently came from Citrix, where for 6+ years, I was focused in the Citrix cloud solution, handling enablement for all technical resources worldwide within the organization, customers and partners. I've been broad spectrum of integrations, an architect, technical and enablement, training, everything, and solutions architect to actual consulting I've even been an admin like most of you, handling those environments and so those support calls. So I know how things work out. A little bit about myself. I've got my dad jokes. I try not to give too many cheesy ones in here, but I got those, making my kids always happy. Got three of little kids out there. Well, little kids, geez, I'm getting old. They're in their 20s and got a teenager. So three kids out there. And then I try to find that balance within the work style of my geekdom and my nerdom as far as handling everything there. So if we can go to the next slide. So again, coming back to XenTegra itself, we were founded by Andy Whiteside. He was working at Citrix and he saw the lack of enablement and community building from partners to customers, which is what he founded and took XenTegra to be able to enable you. So we're here to provide you the information that you need to make the best opportunities in your solutions you provide to your customers. And really what's happening is like I explained to a lot of the customers I talk to on a daily basis, we're not just a niche Citrix shop. We're everything within that virtual workspace. We handle everything there as far as delivery, VDI, from broad spectrum of solutions, cloud-based with AWS, AVD within Azure, VMware, Citrix, and providing those solutions, as well as all those peripheral solutions like you'll see today with PrinterLogic, being able to solve those problems. So we're here to make sure that you have what you need. Again, we resell, we do our professional services, we do consulting as far as just reaching out and helping you find that direction you need to go to. We can actually turn the wrenches. We have our managed services side of the house where we can monitor, we can take care of maintenance, we can fill in technical resources that you need on site if you're looking for an additional team member to add to your staff. And then we also have our own managed solution where we can put your solutions within the cloud, co-hosted, we can manage it completely, we can do a broad spectrum of solutions within our data centers. So if we can go into the next one. So today we have Ethan Jansen with us. Ethan is going to be covering PrinterLogic as it meets the requirements you need within your virtual workspace. And really, he's going to answer any questions that you may have regarding this while talking about their solution and going into some details. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Ethan, so you can take it away.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Glad to be able to have this chance to talk to you all about PrinterLogic. Obviously, it's something I'm passionate about. I'm excited to be able to be in front of you. So mainly today, we'll be talking about our software and how it fits in. As far as the title goes, I went with serverless printing, right? So eliminating print servers and ending print nightmare. So we'll get into this a little bit more as far as what print nightmare is, if there's any of you who are unfamiliar with it. But first, I wanted to kind of do a little intro, kind of like John did, just a little bit about myself. So I live in St. George, Utah. So for those of you who don't know, it's down in the very bottom left corner of Utah, a couple hours northeast of Las Vegas. So a lot of red rock, desert, warm climate. I've changed a little bit since this picture. I shaved off my beard. It wasn't quite as long and nice as John's, but it was getting pretty good. But my wife decided she was tired of kissing so much hair all the time, so I had to shave it. But I've been in the software industry and in IT for about 10 years. Ever since I graduated college, basically been in this industry. So I've bounced around and worked in a couple of different roles. I was a systems engineer here at PrinterLogic before. I've worked in enablement operations, a few different things, all related to kind of sales and software and things like that. So it's something that I'm familiar with and I've loved working in this industry. So with that, I wanted to just go right into it and kind of talk about where PrinterLogic fits in, right? So first, I wanted to lay some of the groundwork, and I apologize if you hear any background noise. We're back in the office finally here. So there's good things and bad things about working in the office, and one of the bad things is the coworkers who can be a little bit loud sometimes, but hopefully that's not too distracting. So I want to lay some of the foundation, some of the groundwork for like some of the common printing architectures that we see initially that most organizations have. I'm sure that you probably fit into one of these two setups, right? So we've got centralized print servers or just print servers in general, and then we've got unmanaged direct IP printing. So as far as print servers go, for those of you who aren't familiar, who maybe aren't using it, typically you have a server somewhere, whether it's in your local office or if it's in like a remote office, that controls all the printing, right? It hosts all of those print queues, and it's used for all of the driver management and making sure that those queues are shared out to all of the end users and they're able to print. It has some benefits. It's nice to have that centralized management that a print server can provide, but also has some pitfalls as well. We'll get into those a little bit later. But typically, these printers, when they're deployed out to the user's workstations, you're usually using something like a group policy object or some other type of script that you've written or that someone on your team is using. And then when that user hits print, that job goes from their workstation to that print server, and then that print server routes it back down to the printer, wherever that might be. And then the other common setup that we see a lot for printing is unmanaged direct IP printing, which is a long way of saying basically when a user hits print, that job goes directly from their workstation to the printer. It's kind of nice because it is very direct and easy like that. You don't usually run into a lot of issues. Each user has their own queue to the printer. So if one user is having an issue on their computer, usually it's isolated to that user and other users aren't having issues. With like the print server, for instance, because it's a shared queue, it's kind of a communal queue. If one user's job is kind of aired out and not printing, they can stop printing for everybody. So direct IP has some benefits, but usually the issues that you run into with direct IP printing is that it's kind of ad hoc, right? You don't have that management piece that you can get from a print server. So in order to add a printer to somebody's workstation, usually it requires like a help desk call. Somebody in the office who knows what they're doing can go in and type in like the IP address or add that printer, however they do that. So it's a little more difficult to scale that across a large organization. And so it has some benefits and some pitfalls as well. So I wanted to dive deeper into what some of these problems are with these two options, right? So first, when it comes to print servers, there's high costs. You have to host it, so that means you have a dedicated server typically. And everything that comes with that dedicated server, right? So you got to pay for the resources, you got to pay for the upkeep, you got to make sure that you're doing all the updates and handling all of that outside of business hours, so it's not interrupting people being able to print. With a print server, you've got that single point of failure. If that print server goes down, or like you're updating it or whatever it might be, then printing just stops until you can resolve that issue. And that goes for everybody who's printing. If that print server has an issue, everybody has a printing issue. And then when it comes to, you also have help desk tickets related to printing with print servers, but you probably see a lot more help desk tickets when it comes to direct IP printing, right? So anytime somebody needs a printer added, they got to call IT and say, hey, I don't have this printer, can you add it for me? And then the last one is just management headaches. So whether it's figuring out how to get the newest printers switched out from your existing fleet, whether it's getting printers added for new people, there's just always headaches whenever there's changes. And so that's where PrinterLogic comes in. Actually, I forgot one more thing, Print Nightmare. This is a big one. So hopefully some of you are at least familiar with Print Nightmare. If you have any print servers, this could have come up and you could have had some issues. But I just wanted to explain a little bit of the background behind Print Nightmare real fast and explain where PrinterLogic can come in and kind of solve some of these issues, right? So basically what happened is July last year, Microsoft announced a big vulnerability with print servers. Basically, I don't want to get like too technical, but like at a high level, basically there was an ability with like remote procedure calls from like a user's workstation where they could basically swap out the drivers on a print server. And because it was so easy for an average user, like with no admin rights or anything like that, to go in and make that type of change on a print server, if there was like a malicious person, they could go in and swap that driver with something like malware, some sort of malicious code, malicious driver that they've tampered with, that they could swap it out, and that would affect everyone in the whole organization. When people log in, they see there's a new driver, their workstation does, and it updates and it pulls down that malicious code. And so it was a very easy way for people to, it was a very easy attack vector. It was very accessible, right? So they announced this vulnerability in July. Basically, their first initial response was not great. Their first initial response was just don't print. Seems easy enough when you're Microsoft, I guess, but for the average company, printing is typically a need, right? It's hard to just stop printing one day. Their next response was to release a patch, which sounds good, except for the patch basically made printing extra difficult. In order to add a printer, change a printer, do anything like that, it required elevated permissions, which means the average end user had no ability to help themselves with printers, and everything had to go through IT. So yesterday, relatively no help desk tickets. People could kind of add their printers and print through their print server, and it was fine. All of a sudden, the next day after this patch, every single person has help desk calls related to printing. So that's why the name, the print nightmare is obviously not the official name, but it quickly became the colloquial way to refer to this issue and this vulnerability. So this is really where PrinterLogic comes in, right? So we can help eliminate print servers, and by eliminating those print servers, we eliminate print nightmare. PrinterLogic is not vulnerable at all to print nightmare because we have 0 print servers, right? We have a whole different setup that completely bypasses these issues. So to kind of summarize like how this works with PrinterLogic, first off, it's safe from print nightmare, right? Because there's no print server involved. So you can kind of see with this graphic, PrinterLogic is a cloud-based solution, and it gives the ability to have all of the management that you need for printers. So as far as managing the drivers, managing who has what printers, things like that, everything that, all those benefits that you get from a print server without any of those downfalls. Because what it's doing with that management piece is actually managing those direct IP printers. So with those two setups that we talked about, you've got print servers and you've got unmanaged direct IP. PrinterLogic is basically combining the best of both worlds there. So the jobs are still going directly from that end user's workstation to the printer, super easy, simple, no extra steps. But you don't sacrifice any of the management capabilities that you need as you start to scale and grow and add more users and more printers and more offices and things like that. And so there's a little piece of software that gets installed on each end user's workstation, super easy to get it out to everybody. It can be deployed in a variety of different ways, whatever management method you're using for your users right now. And then that little piece of software that's installed, that agent, it's checking in with PrinterLogic that's hosted in the cloud, and it's seeing any management changes that you're making as far as updating drivers, users, whatever it might be. And then it pushes that down to the user, and then everything else just happens locally. So that user, when they hit print, goes directly to the printer. If something happens and there's an error with their print job when they're trying to print it, it's isolated to that user because it's all direct IP printing, right? There's no single point of failure with this model. And so it's completely serverless. You don't have to host anything. You don't have to worry about the upkeep and the costs that come along with hosting a server. You're still getting that centralized management, that single pane of glass where you can go in and see exactly what's going on with your printing and take care of all of that. And then it's eliminating those help desk calls. There's a few different ways that can help eliminate these help desk calls. There's like a self-service portal if you want. You can manage all the deployments yourself and like really clearly define like who gets what printers and what circumstances. So it takes all of those headaches away while still giving all of the benefits. And so as far as actually using PrinterLogic and like implementing this, it's relatively simple. I mean, there's really 4 steps that you can kind of break it down into for getting PrinterLogic up and running in your environment, right? So the first one would be migrating, right? So if let's say you have a print server, or if you've got a bunch of direct IP printers in your office, in your organization, we've got tools inside of PrinterLogic that make it easy to go out and grab all that information. So you're not starting from scratch. You don't have to manually recreate every single printer and reinvent the wheel, right? So we've got the tools built in, pull everything in and make that transition pretty seamless. From there, you've got the admin console where you're able to go in and define who gets what printers, right? You can do it based off of Active Directory. You can do it based off of an identity provider like Okta or Azure or Google or whatever identity provider you're using. You can even have it deployed based off of IP addresses, right? So if you've got your offices kind of delineated with different VLANs based off of floor or building or whatever it might be, you can actually have PrinterLogic say, hey, when you're in this office and you have this IP address, you get this printer. When you leave and go back to this office, you have a different IP address, you fall into this range, you get this printer instead. That all happens in the background. And for the user, it's just simple and easy, and they just get the correct default printer based off of where they're working that day. And then from there, there's deployment options, right? So for getting the printers or the drivers and the printers out to everybody, the client is going to take care of that. And that client, like I said before, it's deployed with, you can deploy it with group policies, with SCCM, with whatever tool you might be using to manage your end users already. You can just leverage that to get that little agent installed. And it's a very minimal, like it takes next to no resources to run. And it's only checking in at predefined intervals that you choose, right? So basically you can just have it check in once each day. So it's not always constantly running in the background trying to do these checks and bogging people down. It's just very silent, sitting there in the background and just works when it needs to. And then finally printing, right? So this is the easiest thing. We're not changing the way people print. We're not introducing a new process for them. They still just like normal, they can just go into the corner, click on print, and they choose their printer like they're used to, and everything works. With that being said, you still control some of those things, right? So we do have that client on that workstation, and it can track the jobs that are printed. So you can have some reporting capabilities built in. You can decide what default settings there are for the printers. If you want to default people to black and white printing, to duplex printing, things like that to save costs. You still have that control that you need. But as far as the users are concerned, it's a simple, easy process. It's printing just like normal. So with all that, let's actually stop this PowerPoint, and I'm going to pull up the software. Give me 1 second to transition here.
And while you're doing that, Ethan, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to go ahead and post them and we can address those.
Yeah, absolutely. John's going to help me out with answering questions in the chat. And then if there's anything that would be easier for me to show, he'll let me know. So definitely feel free to ask any and all questions that you have. But this is the admin portal. So it's a very simple, minimal interface, right? The main goal with PrinterLogic is to make the easy things, or keep the easy things easy, right? We don't want to make this a difficult process for you to go in and manage your printers. Really, in most cases, PrinterLogic is a set it and forget it software. So you do those steps, right? You migrate everything in, you define how you want the printers deployed out to people, what settings you want people to use. And then once it's set and in place, you really don't have to touch it. Like if things are working how you expect and you like the settings that you've configured, you're good to go. And you only have to log into PrinterLogic when you want to run a report or when you want to switch out a printer or something like that. So it's very simple, very easy, minimal time commitment as well. So it's pretty straightforward. You can see on this left side, I've got like a tree structure here. So you can organize it however you want with folders, whether it's by state, by office, by floor, whatever is easiest that makes the most sense for your organization. And to change it, you just right click, add a new printer, add a new folder, whatever you need to do. And when you're adding a printer, fairly straightforward. Put in the printer name, you put in the IP address or the host name if that's easier. And then these other like location and comment fields, these are just to help you like know like physically where that printer might be, or just other comments like what type of model it is or whatever other details you want to include on there. And then you just define which driver you want to use. So as you as you use PrinterLogic, you're just going to naturally develop this like driver repository inside of the software. So as you migrate from a print server, it pulls in all those drivers, or as you're getting set up the first time and you upload those drivers from your workstation, those will all be saved in here. So you're not gonna have to every single time go in and add a new driver and worry about that management piece of it. It's all saved in there. And then you've just got this drop down where you can go in and define what driver you want to use there. And you can see we support basically every operating system, right? So we support different types of Linux, Mac, Windows. I'm running this on a Mac, for instance. So very easy to do this. And you can see I can still manage some of these pieces for a Windows machine, even though I'm on a Mac. So very simple, very easy to add these printers in there. And then, like I said before, we've got all the import tools. So make it super easy to pull in everything from your printer. We've got a network scanner. If you're using like a direct IP setup right now, for instance, we've got a network scanner that can go through and scan the subnet that you define and see which printers are where. So you can pull in that information without having to remember or go manually check all the printers and find everything that you need. So the migration is pretty easy. You can see here the setup's pretty easy, where you go in and define the drivers. You can also, with the profiles, these are the default settings. So like I said, if you need to default everybody to black and white, if you want to default everybody to duplex printing, super easy to do here. You create and define that, and then just select it from the drop down for that driver, and that gets deployed out to everybody. Then you've got other, easy deployment options here. So like I said, if you want to integrate this with your LDAP server, if you want to integrate this with your identity provider, we've got those options. We make it easy to get the right printers and drivers out to the right people. And as far as the management piece here goes, one other thing I wanted to mention, like let's say you are swapping out a printer, you're swapping out the driver that you want to use, maybe you're updating to the latest version, maybe you've got like a brand new printer that you're replacing with from an old one or something like that. You don't have to go in and like create a brand new one, delete the old one, worry about deployments and all of that. It's much easier than that. Like as long as the IP address is staying the same or whatever it might be, all you have to do is swap the driver, and PrinterLogic takes care of updating the rest. And all of those users are switched over to the new driver for the new printer. And it's only a couple clicks here in the admin portal for you. So
Ethan, we have a couple of questions that have come in. First off, will there be Windows 11 support?
Yes, and Windows 11 is actually already supported. We've got a handful of people here in the office that have updated to it or are running it. So that's not going to be an issue.
Okay. And give me one sec. We have another one. PrinterLogic offered on-premise management console or SaaS only?
Great question. Yeah, so we do still have an on-premises version. It's a virtual appliance essentially that you would run in your own environment. So if you do still like to host things yourselves, that's totally an option. We've obviously kind of focused on SaaS recently. It seems like most organizations are kind of having that SaaS initiative, but we know that that's not true of every organization. So we still offer that virtual appliance that you can host yourselves.
Great, thanks. That's what we've got so far.
Perfect. Yeah, keep the questions coming. Happy to answer any and all of those. I might sound a little bit like a broken record here, but I'm really just trying to drive home the point that the PrinterLogic it really is simple and easy to roll out. Like with most customers, we have like a 45-minute demo and trial install. We can typically start those in the same meeting. And if we can't finish that trial install on the first call, then we have an additional 30 minutes set up for the next day, the next week, whenever. And within that hour and a half time frame, we're able to get this trial install started. You can have it installed. You can have the client installed on a few workstations. You can have a few printers in here, and you can already start to see exactly how easy and simple it is to manage. So honestly, if you're wondering if this would work for you in your environment with your setup and your printers and everything, it's a very small time commitment to try it out and just check and see.
So Ethan, also, if the agent's not actively looking for updates, will a management driver update push out automatically?
Yeah, so there's a few different options with that, right? So you can set the client to check in at regular intervals, right? So you could say like every 4 hours or something like that. You can have the client check in just to check, like that check-in packet that it sends. We're talking like kilobytes, not megabytes or anything like that. So very minimal traffic, very minimal resource usage on the workstation. So it just sends that check-in packet and says, hey, any updates? And then PrinterLogic responds and says, yes, here's the update, here's the new driver, or no updates. So you can have it set at a time interval for that check-in if you want, or by default, it checks in each time the user logs into their workstation. So each morning or after lunch or whatever, it's going to do that check-in as well. So they're still basically, regardless of what you choose, it is going to do those check-ins and make sure that's staying up to date.
Okay, and then we have another question here. Private or secure print queues where the user has to go to the printer to enter a code or scan badge to print their documents, supportability for that?
Yes, there is. Yep. So there's different options for that depending on the printer and what the desired setup is, right? So we do have badge release options. We do have control panel applications for quite a variety of different printers. We do support like third-party badge readers as well. We also have mobile app release. So basically you can go in and like print out a QR code that you can just like tape onto the printer or whatever. And then the person can walk up with their phone, scan the QR code and release the job that way. So there's definitely a lot of different options for that secure release need. The best with that is to probably schedule some time specifically with like XenTegra and PrinterLogic reps so that we can dive into the specifics of your environment, right? So once we know better, like which printers you're using, like as far as manufacturer and model, and also like your desire for like badge release versus mobile release or whatever other option, we can really dive into those details and figure out what would work for you.
Okay, and then one last question here is if there's time, can you touch on off-network printing?
Yeah, and off-network printing is actually a relatively newer feature. I think we launched it towards the end of last year. So it's pretty cool what it's able to do, right? So just like it sounds like off-network. So if the printer is on a separate logical network from the user is still able to print. And so the way that we do that is through the use of the clients. So the user is obviously going to have a client on their workstation, like that agent that's running. And then you would just need to have an agent on the same network as that printer, whether that's a server, whether it's a dedicated workstation, whatever it might be, the secretary's workstation, basically whatever computer is always going to be on that same network. You just designate that as the kind of the off-network service client, I guess you could say. So when that user hits print on their home network or just a different VLAN, like a guest network or whatever it might be, when they hit print, it sends that job from using the clients, it sends that job from their workstation over to the other workstation that's on the same network, which then routes it to the printer. So it's still not a server necessarily, like it's just a workstation there that's on the same network, and they communicate, sends the job, and then it gets printed out. And then in the future, I mean, obviously this is kind of next stage. It's under development. It'd be later this year or next year, but we're looking at even taking out that other step of having the other workstation on the network and just being able to communicate directly to the printer. So that this off-network printing is still going to improve from where it's at. But yeah, it's very easy to set up. Just have two workstations and they just send the job to each other and print to the printer.
Okay, looks like we're up to speed on the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I don't want to dive into too many of like the nitty gritty details of the portal. I don't want it to take away from like what we've talked about so far. There's probably just like, I guess I'll just highlight a couple things here with like reporting and things like that. So let's look at, so we've got some overview reports where it can show like print details kind of on a macro level, right? With charts and graphs and things like that. It can be helpful to kind of visualize some of these things as far as like how many print jobs do we have on a weekly basis? Like what types of applications are people printing from? how much of our printing is simplex versus duplex or color versus black and white or whatever it might be. But then we've got also some like specifics here. And you know what, this may be my demo environment. I'm not sure how much I'll actually have. Main thing to point out here, I guess I should have done a test print job beforehand, but with this, we can dive into the specifics of the print, right? So with this client that we have installed on the workstation, like with a print server, that job is going through the print server to the printer, so you can capture every single detail of the job. With PrinterLogic, we're not going to do that. We're not going to route the print job up through the cloud and then down to the printer. So we have that client installed that's just going to capture the high level metadata about the printer or about the print job, right? So we're going to capture who sent it, like the title of the job. We're going to capture when it was sent, how large it was, things like that. We're going to capture some key details about it. So you still have the reporting needs taken care of without having to worry about the overhead of like a print server or a different solution that's capturing every detail about the job. It's also more secure because you don't have to worry about those print jobs being stored anywhere. So if there was like a security violation or something like that, nobody's going to go in and find whatever people were printing. They're not going to find sensitive information that was printed or anything like that. We're only going to see like job titles and who sent the job. So very high level, kind of innocuous data that can be important and can be useful. Like for instance, we've had organizations who use this print job data to kind of audit things, right? So they would run these reports and then they would kind of do some searches through the reports for like certain job titles because of the way their systems operated and things like that, they would know if people were printing things that they shouldn't based off of the job title. So there's still ways that this can be useful and important. But basically, just again, trying to drive home the point that it's simple and easy and working in the background and it's not resource intensive. But yeah, I think those are probably the main things I wanted to go over. Just like I said, basically like 4 easy steps to getting PrinterLogic to work, right? Migrating from your current setup, whether that's importing from a print server or switching from direct IP, and then managing things in this admin portal here. You can see it's simple interface, easy to do. Getting that client installed in everybody's workstation and having the printers and the drivers installed, and then the user printing. So super easy.
So Ethan, I got a couple of questions for you. What is the scale as far as like vertical markets are concerned? Specific peripheral devices out there, and how's that handled?
Right. So I mean, as far as the scale and like verticals and things like that, there's definitely verticals that see more immediate value, right? So like we work really well in the healthcare space, in the government space, in like the legal space or accounting firms, things like that. People that are obviously doing a lot of high volume printing, but it scales into any size organization. Like we've got customers who have 2 printers, and then we've got customers who have 2,000 printers, right? Or 20,000 printers is one of our larger ones, right? So there's definitely, if it's any size environment, and then we've got, we support quite a wide variety of different types of printers and devices. Like we've got people who use like those little like Zebra, like receipt printers or label printers, things like that. That's not an issue. Basically any type of printer that's using like a driver, like a printer driver, like a type 3 signed driver for anybody who's in the space, it's supported with PrinterLogic. So not a lot of limits there.
And just to refresh, the OSs for the client that you support, what are they again?
Yep. So Windows, Mac. I'm running it on a Mac. We support 2 types of Linux, right? Like Red Hat Linux or other types of Linux devices. We have an app for Android and iOS as well, so you can do mobile print from those. So basically, we've covered most of the bases there. And
thin client support?
Yes. Yep. So like we support basically any type of thin client. Like we have an integration with iGel for their thin clients. We work in Citrix and in all virtual environments. The client it can run on a thin client, or it can run on like in the virtual image itself. So there's different ways that the setup can accommodate those types of setups. So yep, we can do that for sure.
Cloud-based solutions like Workspace or AVD?
Yeah, I haven't personally set it up in those, but some of my coworkers have figured out how to make that work. So yeah, there's definitely room there as well.
Okay, and then the SaaS-based solution for the portal, do you what compliancy requirements do you meet within that?
Yeah, so we're currently working on like our SOC 2 audits and everything, so we're going to get certified there. Because of the nature of the way that our software is working, and like we're not storing any sensitive information or anything like that, there's not too many security concerns right now. We've been able to like with like Print Nightmare, for instance, we weren't vulnerable to that. With the Log4j vulnerability that came out not too long ago, we weren't vulnerable to that either. So because of just the nature of the way our software works and how we're managing things and how most things are staying on that local network, it's very, very secure. And I mean, we've got some government certifications for, I mean, I'm blanking on the name all of a sudden, but we have government clients like the DoD, for instance, is one of our largest clients, the Department of Homeland Security. So it's secure enough that they're willing to accept and use it in their environments as well.
Sure. And then a couple of questions have come in. See, I got them stirring,
Yep.
got them thinking.
That's good.
Any HIPAA issues with metadata collection?
Right. So the only time where that concern has really come up with the metadata collection is if they include like patient names or any sensitive information like that in the job title itself. Most organizations don't do that, but occasionally some hospitals or systems like that may. So that's the only concern that you might have. And if that is a concern, and if you do have a setup like that might contain some of that information in the job title, then you can actually just turn off the reporting feature. So obviously that has some drawbacks as well. You lose some of that capability, but if that's a major concern and you still want that management piece in place, we can still accommodate that.
Gotcha. And then SSO integration, can you show the self-service features?
Yeah. Yep. So with SSO, we like I mentioned, we support integration with LDAP, with Active Directory, with different identity providers as well. And then we've got this self-service portal for the users. So when they log in they can log in with their identity provider account. That can be linked to which printers they're able to see here, and they're able to actually install these printers themselves. So you can upload floor plan maps. Like I've had clients in the past who've gone in and like taken a picture of their fire escape route map or whatever and just uploaded that. So there's ways you can make this work, obviously, but yeah, it's super easy to have that integrate with your SSO provider so that everyone's seeing what they're supposed to see while also still having some options for installing the printers themselves.
And they would be able to see those devices based upon their permissions assigned to the shared device, correct?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So when they're logged in there, you can either define like which printers automatically get installed based off of their group that they're in, like you said, the permissions that they have, that thing, kind of thing, or you can define which printers they can see here based off of those criteria as well.
Okay, and then can alerts be sent directly to help desk solutions?
Yes. Yep. So we have, again, this is my demo environment, so you have to forgive me for some of the things not working completely, but we do have SNMP status monitoring, right? So that workstation that has that agent installed, it's able to track SNMP traffic. If you want, you can enable it so specific people do that, or everybody does it, just depending on what works best, I guess. But we can have it monitor SNMP traffic, which is basically just the information that printer is kind of broadcasting, right? So it can just monitor that and watch that printer that's over there. And if it notices that there's like a certain error message or like the current status changes to low toner or low paper or whatever it might be, you can configure alerts for that. So as soon as that agent sees that and tracks that, it triggers this alert, and that email can get sent to help desk. It can get sent to a specific office manager. It can be sent to both. It can be sent to as many people as you need, just to make sure that that can get taken care of.
And then this is another one on my own. What type of integration do you have with other third-party solutions like ServiceNow or other types of reporting or monitoring solutions out there?
Mm-hmm. So there's some monitoring solutions that we can just work right alongside. We don't really affect the way that they work, right? So I think ServiceNow might be one of those, for instance. As far as direct integrations, we don't necessarily typically like directly integrate in a lot of cases, but we do have options for like a data warehouse, for instance, where our information, we can store all of our information in a data warehouse in like a database somewhere, and then that can be utilized with another solution, right? Like a Power BI or whatever, like a Tableau type software. So there's other ways we can connect with that.
Okay. And then does PrinterLogic offer WOL compatibility?
So I'm not familiar with WOL.
Bernard, if you could explain a little bit deeper there, we can get that answered for you.
Yeah, if you could elaborate for me.
And then you said the SSO can be applied for the user or the admin.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So you can have the admins required to log in with their SSO account as well.
Okay. Doesn't look like Bernard has given any more details on that. Let me see. Bernard, you're still online. So what we'll do is we got Claire coming online here, so we know we're wrapped up. Okay, real quick, Bernard, the ability to turn on a printer if it's offline.
Okay, yeah. So because of the nature of like how we're managing printing and things like that, we're more focused on like the drivers and the users' workstations. So we don't have that level of integration with the printers themselves. So if you have a different management tool, like I know HP has management tools for their printers, they can probably do that a little bit more directly, but we're not able to do that within PrinterLogic.
And then also one other question from myself, Ethan, is there anything that we should be basically looking forward to within the next couple of quarters from PrinterLogic, something you can share with us that's on the radar?
Yeah, so the timeline always changes and shifts, so I can't commit to any specific dates, but I know in the next few quarters, we're looking at adding a few features like quota management, for instance. So if you want to set limits on how many print jobs users are able to do, that's going to be included here. And then we're also going to have things like matter reporting, meaning that like you can attach billing codes to the print jobs, or I mean, the users can attach billing codes to the print jobs. So like for instance, like legal firms or organizations like that who need to have the option to do bill back. We're going to be able to support that and kind of facilitate that within PrinterLogic. So those are some of the major features that are on the roadmap.
So we'll be on the lookout for that. Again, no commitment on anything there. It's
That's
just
right.
just a little preview of what's coming. Ethan, thank you so much for your time. If we could go back to the slide real quick.
Oh, and sorry, if I
Sure.
just real fast, I'll just breeze through the slides so we can get back to some of the other things. I know we still got to do that raffle real fast. So I just wanted to highlight this really quick. Some of the results speak for themselves here. So I just wanted to show some of these numbers, but 87% of our customers have an immediate ROI using the software. Lots of reduction in help desk calls related to printing, adding printers, things like that. We've even reduced consumables because of the options to like default people to duplex printing or default people to black and white printing instead of color. And then with some of our advanced modules like secure release as well, that can cut down on printing. And then I like this number the best. 97% of our customers would recommend PrinterLogic to somebody else. So I think if somebody's willing to do that, that speaks volumes. So just wanted to mention that. But yeah, I will pass this back over to you guys. Let's see.
So again, I want to point out that the Bronco giveaway splash page, I've given the link within the chat, so you have that there. feel free to go ahead and go there. You see the details about entering to win a brand new Bronco. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Claire, who's going to handle our raffle.
Yes. Let me see if I can take over the screen. So what we're doing today is we're raffling off Amazon gift cards. So we're going to do 10 of those. So you can see I've entered in the names in this really hokey website that I found to be able to choose one at the same time, but we're choosing 10 names, and then those are the names that it's chose. So I don't know how to say that, but Sherwin, Jordan, Deb, Thomas, Alex R, Henry, Takeu, Andrew, and Norman. So what we will do is that we will reach out to you guys with your Amazon gift card. So look for that email from me very soon. And thank you guys for attending. I appreciate it.
Congratulations, everybody. Everybody's a winner. Well, 10 people are a winner. But yes, I want to thank you again for attending Webinar Wednesdays brought by XenTegra. Ethan, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here to cover PrinterLogic. And I hope that you got the information you need. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out with us at XenTegra, and we'll be able to help you with any PrinterLogic questions or solutions that you're looking into in the future. And again, thanks again for another happy Wednesday. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.